And we're live.
Good evening, everybody. We are raging with Billy Diamond Jr. He's got the body coming up. We're going to talk about his creative journey and all the things that brought him here. His Kickstarter is active right now. It's got 20 days to go. He's reached goal, but we want to hit some stretch goals. So while you're tuning in, make sure that you share this out, subscribe, and I've got an outro. I'm sorry, an outro. Right. Yeah, we're done here, Billy. You hear me? We're done.
Yeah. Well, get out while it's good, right?
Get out while it's good. We've got an intro. So while we're doing that, hit the subscribe button, share this out with your friends, and we will be right back after this.
Raging.
Hello, everybody. This is another episode of Ragin' With. Tonight we have Billy Diamond Jr. He's got the body happening on Kickstarter right now. This is episode 52. What? What kind of crazy is that? Let me drop the card and say hello.
So does that make us one of DC's official alternate realities? Since we're the 50. Sorry, lame comic book joke.
I totally believe that I'm a variant. They just haven't caught me yet. How are you this evening?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing really well. We're going to dive right into it because one of the things we love about putting our people in the hot seat is getting the creative journey. Like, what in the world were you thinking when you said, yeah, I'm going to put a comic book together? Because I have to say, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Yeah. Can be a little challenging.
Mm-hmm. What were you thinking, Billy? I got to know.
Well, there's really only ever one thing I've ever wanted to do, and it was make comic books. It was always as a kid, when you're a kid and you're consuming comics, you're really only taking in the pictures. I remember buying comic books for years, and I probably didn't even read half of them. I'm just there looking at Wolverine fighting Deadpool or whatever the case may be. Spider-Man doesn't have shoes on in this issue. Who knows why, but not reading them, just looking at the pictures. And so you come into it with that artistic standpoint. And I've always been artistic, and I've always been told that I'm creative and artistic. And I guess I agree. So it really did start with just wanting to be a comic book artist. And then as, time goes on and you realize how difficult that process is, especially before the digital age when everybody was still drawing with pens and pencils and using the old school coloring techniques with the plates and everything, and, cutting and pasting lettering onto the pages for the final print. That's an industrial process. It's not something that you can really do on your own, just sitting in your bedroom and in high school or when you're in college and doing whatever you're doing. And so then it started to kind of become a focus of, well, maybe the art process of it isn't what I should be focusing on. Maybe the writing aspect of it is. And this also coincided with the time when I really started to appreciate comics as more of an art form and more of a medium in and of itself, rather than just, cool stories with superheroes in them. And, this is probably around the time too, where I started to follow writers instead of artists. And that didn't happen because I thought, oh, I'm going to be a cool comic book writer. It just kind of happened as I got older that I started gravitating towards, Grant Morrison and Warren Ellis and Mark Millar, and just the list goes on. We're talking late 90s, early 2000s. Plug in popular comic book writer from that time, and I probably was a fan of them. And it started to kind of get that sense of what a page actually looks like, and how a script and how the script and the pictures that actually end up on the page need to work together, and that synergy that really is. Because even when because you mentioned The Body, which is the Kickstarter campaign that we have going on right now, I actually wrote that, and a buddy of mine did the art for it, Jay Red. And we've been collaborating we went to high school together. I've known Jay since we were in middle school, probably.
Mm-hmm.
So that relationship and that collaborative process has been in play for a long time. And all the way back to the day of when my pitches were, all right, so I've got this idea for this comic book. It's about this guy, and he's got superpower. Insert whatever superpower here. And that was the only idea of, like, that's what a comic book is about. It's about a guy with superpowers, right? That's all you need. And then, and now it's becoming more of okay, well, I've got this idea of a theme that I want to get across, or I've got, in the case of The Body specifically, the whole thing started with one scene of these two guys driving down some dark country road at night, talking about 90s era grunge music. And just that whole conversation played itself out in my head. And then from there, it's like, well, what are these guys doing? Why are they in this car together? And so you start to kind of build their narrative, and then it just kind of takes you wherever it takes you. But that just it's magic, it really is magic. You can do so much with comic books that you can't do with anything else, which is why I think a lot of adaptations of comic book work kind of fall short. I mean, MCU aside, because that really is, I think DC's attempt at making their own shared universe shows how difficult that really is to do. You can't just have a whole bunch of characters and throw movies out there. Like, there's got to be that guiding principle, and all the people kind of have to be together, and everybody moving towards the same goal, which is exactly what a comic book is. I mean, you've got to have all these different people moving towards the same goal to get this finished product that then just is 24 pages of funny books that back in the day took you 30 minutes to an hour to read. Now maybe it takes you 10, but styles change. I'm not begrudging that. I'm just commenting on it. So yeah, I mean, that's really what drew me in. I mean, from day one of and it started, I'm a child of the 90s. I got into comics because of the 1992 X-Men animated series. So that was my gateway. That's what started the whole thing. I mean, it's funny. I have a son that's in 3rd grade, and I tell him all the time, you realize that I was in 3rd grade when a cartoon came out that defined my interest for the rest of my life. And it really did, to a very large degree. Because without that cartoon, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. There wouldn't be all this stuff on the shelf behind me. Like, it really did. It pointed me down a path for the last, for the rest of my life. And I can't see that changing. And, like I said, just trying to capture that magic and trying to put together try to tell a story that I would want to read, and hope that other people would want to read it too,
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you went to high school with Jay. So what was that like? Did you guys kind of pass a notebook around? Was it, I know for me, we had like notes under the desk. We would leave like a piece of paper, and each of us, like our task was to like write a line or a paragraph or something like that, leave it under the desk and hope the teacher didn't catch it. Because we were all like going from class to class and stuff like that, but we all tried to get at the same desk, so we passed a notebook, we passed some paper, and we made stories like that. What was that like for you guys?
So for us, it was, I don't know, we had this weird, because it was me and Jay, and there was a couple of other guys that I was friends with that were also kind of on that path too. They didn't stay on the path nearly as long as Jay and I have, obviously, but we all drew, we all it became this competition of, well, your stuff looks better than mine. Let me look at what you're doing and try to emulate what you're doing so that I can get better. And then, but at the same time, all of us looking at our own work and going, man, this is terrible. I suck. I'm never going to be good enough, because that's the paradigm of all artists, is that everybody else's work is always better. Yours is never up to par. You tear yourself down constantly. And that's the huge hurdle to get over. But, we can get to that later.
Oh, yeah. Total imposter syndrome. It's like, oh, why am I here? I don't even belong on this playground, right?
Exactly.
So when you're kind of putting together your story and things like that, you said you're an artist, but now you're a writer. What do you kind of lean more towards then?
Well, so it depends on the project. So, like I said, me and Jay have been collaborating on stuff since way back in the day. So I know what he's looking for whenever I hand him a script. So it depends. So what I would give him versus what I would give someone else that I'm not as familiar with. My tendency is to give, if I don't know what your style is and I don't know what you're going to do with what I'm giving you, I'm going to go full tilt. I'm going to give you page by panel by everything. I'm going to map the whole thing out in my head and I'm going to give it to you. Doesn't mean that that's what you have to do with it, but this is how it looks in my head. And here you go do your thing with it. And let's see what we want to change. And, I'm sure that as the artist, you'll have way better ideas than I did sitting here trying to come up with this. But with Jay specifically, I know that for him, like the script for the body was just like 3 pages in a Word document that I sent to him in prose form. I let him have complete control over the page flow, the page layouts, everything. I just gave him plot and dialogue, and he ran with it from there. And then I came back and I lettered it, so I was able to kind of come back and adjust the dialogue and figure out how I was going to arrange all that stuff so that it didn't cover up the good bits on the page and all that.
Because lettering is an art in itself, and a lot of people don't get that.
Yes, you can't just throw letters on a page.
No,
just
definitely not.
Getting into that triangle or that diamond-shaped pattern, like that alone, trying to figure out how to put the right words on the right line to get the right shape to put it in a bubble is. Yeah, no, it is its own monster for sure.
I definitely want to talk about lettering and the pitfalls and the good stuff about it too. I mean, because you have final say because it's your IP, which is great. But I love the fact that it's kind of like a shorthand when you've been working with somebody for a while. That you develop this shorthand where you don't have to tell them everything. But when it comes to finding a new artist, because let's just say Jay's like, nah, he's like, it's kind of out of my wheelhouse. You're going to have to find somebody else. What is your pathway to finding another artist to work with?
Well, so what I would probably do, because like I said, I am an artist as well. So I actually, for the most part, everything that I write, I'm also the one I do everything. So I'll do the writing, the pencils, the layouts, everything. Like it's me from start to finish. And then I will sometimes, a lot of times, bounce stuff off of Jay just for like, hey, here's this page, I just finished it. Pick it apart and tell me if there's something here that doesn't look right, just to get a second set of eyes on it. But I mean, I do most of my own artwork, to be honest. But really, I'm sorry, what was the original question? I squirreled myself.
So I might have also, hold on a second. Let me think.
It was, what's the plan if it's outside your wheelhouse for the art? How do you
when it's not in your comfort zone, but you got a story and you really want to get it out there. How are you finding those artists?
So I know there's a lot of groups and stuff on Facebook that is full of a lot of people posting ideas. I mean, really, what it's going to come down to is, you got to find somebody that's got the same vision that you have, because if what you have in your head and what they have in their head doesn't match, especially because they're the ones who are going to take your ideas and create the visual piece of it. So if what they're envisioning doesn't work, then it's all going to fall apart. So you got to find somebody that is the right fit for what you want to do. And, I'm less, I mean, obviously you've got to have the technical ability to put a page together and it not, look like hot garbage. But I'll take somebody whose skill is, so I guess the best way to put it is, if you can get the storytelling down, if you can tell a visual story on the page, I'm less concerned that your anatomy is perfect, that every angle is exactly perfect. If you can tell the story and we share the vision, then that's really the most important thing to me. I mean, yeah, would I love to always get like Frank Quietly, who's just this master visual storyteller? I mean, yeah, to get somebody like that every single time would be great, but it's not going to happen. But you just, would I rather have, I don't want to throw any artists under the bus because I definitely could here, but I'd rather have somebody who was a little less polished, but had the storytelling pieces down than have somebody that was the opposite of that. Like, I'm not trying to draw an anatomy book, or I'm not writing an anatomy book. I'm not writing a manual. I'm telling a story. And, so many great stories. I mean, you look at Frank Miller's later work. I mean, you can't, I don't know how anyone could sit here and tell me that Dark Knight 2 was as technically sound as Dark Knight 1, which was not as technically sound as his Daredevil work. I mean, you can follow Frank Miller's progression, and it's like this dude is just getting wilder and wilder and wilder. But the storytelling of his visual art style never faltered. It just, maybe it got a little too far out there for some people, whatever everybody's got their own opinions about things, but the storytelling was always there. And I'll take Frank Miller now over anybody probably, just because he's, well, and part of that too is a lot of my visual storytelling when I'm imagining how things flow in my head. I mean, he was one of the people that kind of influenced that. So, that's maybe a little bit of a biased opinion, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I want the visual storytelling more than I want the polish. Mm-hmm. I want steak, not sizzle.
There you go. Because steak,
exactly,
that just fills you up. That fills you up and replenishes the soul.
And if it's a Mexican restaurant, the sizzle's probably just water they poured on the plate before they brought it out to you.
Damn straight.
Oh no! Save your ass. Just throw it in the toilet.
Wow, man.
I said that. Now, one of the biggest challenges, I'm about 2 years into my comics journey. Okay. And I'm so glad that I didn't do this when I was younger, because I don't think I would have had the patience or the discipline. But when I first came in, because I started with prose. I'm a storyteller. I love writing long form and things like that. But when it came down to scripting, I've seen plays, scripts for plays and movies. But when I started asking questions about comic books, everybody had a different answer. There's like not one standard.
No, there is definitely not.
So do your scripts, because you were saying how you kind of have that shorthand with Jay and you have to go more in depth if you have to go outside, from your own skill set and things like that. But for your own sake, what do your scripts look like? Does it look more like an outline because you kind of have everything in your head, or do you put everything down on paper just so that it's fleshed out on paper?
So when I'm doing something for myself, a lot of times I'll make it all the way to the outline, and that's usually about as far as I go, because when I know that I'm going to be doing the artwork myself, there's not a whole lot of reason in my head to.
Well, no, there's not, because you know what you
exactly.
want.
Yeah.
But how about when you're doing for someone else? Like,
when you're doing for somebody else. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really going to come down to if I have no idea what I'm getting into, if I don't know what their pages are going to look like, if I'm working with somebody who has no samples even to show me, I'm going to give them everything. I'm going to write every detail down that I feel like they need to convey my vision. And just because I'm conveying my vision, that doesn't mean that your vision isn't better or that we can't make something in the middle work. But I'm going to give you my vision as a starting point, for you to start kind of getting your own vision together. So, you know, I mean, even to the point of I have written some scripts when I didn't have a specific artist in mind, when I was just writing a script. And, you know, this isn't anything that ever got done, but I did write, I think I wrote 2 issues of something that I didn't have an artist in mind for. I wasn't going to do it myself because this was before I had figured out the art piece and how to get all that together. I actually, on each one of the pages, I wrote everything, and then I had a little thumbnail on the page of what that page looked like in my head. So I was actually giving the panel breakdown, and then in my script, it was page 1, panel 1, you know, wide angle, three-quarter depth, or, you know, 3 same-size panels across the top row, roughly halfway down the page. You know, I was giving dimensions, I was giving full panel descriptions, full breakdowns. Like,
Wow.
this is the text that's going to be in this panel.
Right.
So yeah,
It also depends. It's going to depend on who you're working with too, because there are some artists who'd much rather be given prose, and then they're the artists that prefer the breakdown into pages, and then you have the guys that want the panels, and then you got the guys that like, what angle do you want? You got to give them all of it. So like in my experience, I've written for guys that have been pretty much all ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the thing too, is not knowing who you're, and that's why I say not knowing who I'm writing for. I'm going to give them way more than they probably want.
For sure.
Because if I give them way more than they might want, then if they have, like, you know, like I said, if they have their own ideas, then they can kind of do their own thing with it and throw some of what I'm putting on page for them out the window, and then, you know, I'll rework it after the fact. But on the other end of that, if I end up with a guy who needs me to tell him every single shot to put in the page, and I just give him a prose outline, he's going to be lost. He's not going to be able to do anything. So better to, you know, give them too much and let them pare it down themselves. And, you know, and again, it's all collaboration. It's all, you know, synergy and making sure that you have the same vision, and because you're both trying to tell the same story. So, you know, hopefully the hope there would be that I wouldn't give somebody a script and then them look at that and go, oh man, this is not at all what I want out of a script. But then just to sit there silently and try to hammer through it, because they're probably not going to finish the book that you're trying to get them to do the artwork for. So the hope would be in that moment that they would say, hey, look, dude, this isn't what I want. Like, let's try to figure out what this script needs to look like. Because I don't think that there is, I don't even think any given writer, unless they do their own artwork, I don't see how you could ever have one definitive thing that you as a writer do. Because like you said, you never know who your artist is going to be, and your artists, you know, they're going to come from all over.
Now, I have a preference. My preference is I like to give the artist freedom, since that gives me the opportunity to limit dialogue. Yes. Because the art is, you've got to have the arc in the story. Yes, you need the words, but the art is everything. It really is. In game, you can have a great story if your art's shit, nobody's looking.
Yeah.
So I like to give the artist freedom. I prefer to give them a page by page breakdown and let them determine the panels, because, you know, they're going to see the action sequences in their head. But for the most part, we get the guys that want the page 1, panel 1, you know.
Yeah. See, I would almost rather, if I were doing, and I've never been in this situation, but I know for me personally, I would rather be given your outline and then let me figure it out on my own. I don't like being, okay, you know, so this is.
You don't like being micromanaged.
I don't like being told what to do. So.
And as an artist, you should have that creative freedom.
Absolutely.
Because it's a collaborative project. So I'm all for that.
Yeah. And are you really an artist if you're just like being told, draw a line here, put eyeball there? Like, you could go and get any random art student to do that for you. But if you're actually making a comic book, then you should have somebody who has a vision of their own. If they're a comic book artist, because there's a difference between somebody who does, like, you know, portraits and is very painterly with what they do, and is very, you know, like, they have all these, you know, every other different kind of artist that's out there. Comic book art is its own thing, and you can always tell when somebody is drawing a comic book and they are not a comic book artist, because it never flows right. It'll be the most perfectly sculpted artwork you've ever seen, and every panel is completely disconnected from every other panel on the page because they don't know how to make it flow together and work as a single page. And even beyond that, to make each page flow into the next page, it's a completely different beast than just being able to draw anatomy and scenery.
And they don't understand the concept of the page turn. And
not only that, but now you're dealing with potentially two different types of artists, right? Your cover artist and then your sequential artist, and they are not the same beast at all.
See, and I fall into the thinking of, I want my sequential artist to be my cover artist. There's nothing.
I love that.
I love that.
And variant covers and things like that, that's all great. That's fine. But your primary, first print cover should represent the art that's in the book.
Thank you. We love you.
Inside.
Because
yes.
One of the things that irritated me the most is, Grant Morrison was actually, well, I didn't follow. It wasn't necessarily that I fell for a cover trap. I mean, I have.
I did. I'm so
my
bad
God.
at myself.
But you look at Grant Morrison and his run on, not the run itself, but the later collected Doom Patrol series that he did, and you've got, God, if I hadn't been trying to come up with the name right now, I would have been able to come up with it. But you've got this super polished, really clean artist who did all the covers for all those trades, and then you open it up and it's Richard Case, and it's like, this is not the same thing that's on the cover. Now, granted, I grew to love Richard Case's art as I read through that run, but that initial shock of what's on the cover versus what's in the book, man, it is jarring. And I was this close to being like, fuck that, I don't want to, this isn't what I was sold. This isn't the bill of goods that I paid for. I'm glad that I didn't, because now that run is one of my favorite all-time comic book runs ever. But one of the other ones that really irritates me is when Frank Quietly does a cover, and then you open it up and it's just like random cartoonist number 2 did all of the rest of the art for the book. And it's like, I was promised Frank Quietly, and I got whoever this dude is. And it irritates me to no end when the cover doesn't match the interiors.
I got sucked into it because, as well as I do, last year everybody was like a captive audience.
You mean the COVID comics?
And so I wasn't able to flip through this book, but I totally fell in love with the art on the outside. So not having the ability to flip through the book, it was just basically a blind purchase.
Yeah.
And when I got it, I was so disappointed with the interiors and the lack of story that I was just like, well, I basically spent like $10 on a really pretty cover. And I haven't picked it up since.
Was that a physical location or a crowdfunder?
It was actually an online sale.
See, now online or crowdfunders, this is the way I work now, because I've been hit 3 or 4 times with shit art after having an excellent cover. Okay. I am not backing your shit unless you have interior pages in your campaign crawl. Period.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, I totally agree, because, and you see a lot of people who will post stuff on, I don't really do Indiegogo too much. I more just do Kickstarter for the most part. I know I'm missing out on a whole subsection of crowdfunded comics. And
I don't know.
After the show. We'll talk after the show.
I actually saw that you guys have one, or you guys are promoting one on Indiegogo. I was like, I might need to get over here on this. Yeah.
It's tough.
It's a whole other beast.
Oh yeah. I have actually seen people post crowdfunding campaigns where they don't have a story, they don't have art, they have an idea. It's like, what are you doing? Like, you want me to pay you for your idea? You don't have any idea what you're getting into, and it's obvious that you don't. Otherwise, you would have never asked me for money for an idea.
And then you never know if you're going to get the book. At that point, you're like, ever
Right.
going to see this thing?
It's
Yeah.
never, it's never coming out. And I saw one. It's like this dude's basically asking for $50,000 because he wants to start Image with crossover content. It's
I
like,
saw that. Oh yeah.
dude, you ain't there, man.
It's
You're
like,
not
dude,
there.
go shove your noodle up your butt. Go somewhere
Yeah.
else.
I actually donated $1 just so I could comment on the campaign
Oh
and tell him all the things that he did wrong, and also because I just wanted to see how it went.
So we are sitting with Billy Diamond Jr., the most hated man in comics right No, just kidding. It's like, how dare you post like an
Are you
intelligent,
kidding me? This dude is my
some
freaking
intelligent
interview of the
feedback.
week. Sure, we need a trophy.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, you never backed a campaign, you're launching this, nobody's ever heard of you, and you want $50,000? Like, who are you, dude? You know? Yeah, that's what I mean. We were talking about this earlier. To stay uncomfortable, everything is a learning curve. Every time you get out there,
we need to write a song, and it needs to be something about you are not a Tucci, you are not Toledo. Get the fuck out of here, you little. I don't know how it's gonna go, but we're gonna totally write a song.
We're gonna totally write a song. Oh my gosh, the dudes will be like flapping their mouths and stuff like.
Do our commercial so we can get back.
We are at the 30-minute mark. We are going to take a little bit of a break. We have got a campaign going up right now. It is Greed. That is on Indiegogo, and that is to get caught up before we launch Greed 2. Here we go. We'll be right back after this. And we are raging with Billy Diamond Jr. He's got the body on Kickstarter right now. Make sure that you get over there and give it a like and a share. Back it if you can. If not, hey, just hit the button. Share it out with your friends, and let's help each other out. That's what we do here. Hey, Nita.
Oh, for a 10% discount on your Gemini mailers, head over to Gemini Comic Supply Store and enter coupon code VOLT10. That is coupon code VOLT number 10. Thank you to Varian and Krista Grant over at Indie Volt Radio.
Yeah, that's right. Save some money, because let me tell you something. Those Gemini mailers have saved many comic books, especially from Nita's mail carrier.
Oh, that's
terrible.
Such a nice term.
Oh my gosh, it is terrible. Get your comics safe
Ugh.
to your destination. Billy Diamond Jr. We are going to drop the card here and welcome back. There you go. That's right. Use that coupon code. Use that coupon code too. Save some money. I wanted to talk a little bit about lettering, because again, this is about the creative process, the journey, and all that stuff. One of the toughest things for me on the learning curve with comics was lettering. And we mentioned it earlier today that it's its own art form in itself. And I think a lot of times really underappreciated.
Oh,
yeah. So being that you
get a bad one.
Yeah. Oh, and there goes my dog. Nita, take over.
What do you want me to say? You do
ask about the lettering. Ask about the lettering. Oh, okay. So
Billy, tell me all about lettering. Tell these folks at home it's not a simple task.
It is not hard. A simple task. It is So it's interesting because to me, well, lettering starts with the artwork. I mean, it starts with the guy who's putting the art on the page because they have to give you somewhere to put the lettering. And so if you get somebody who's just filling every single panel with all this information that can't be covered up, then you're screwed. I mean, you're going to have to put something somewhere. But so, I mean, that's really where it starts. And like I said earlier, the other part of it is like font matters. It definitely matters. And I've experimented with some fonts that just straight didn't work. Like they work whenever you've got like, 3 or 4 words all together, but then you get to the next page and you have a whole like paragraph, not a paragraph, but a good chunk of text, and you just lose all the letters in it. So I mean, font choice is important. I do it all digitally, so yeah, I'm not cutting and pasting. I'm not hand lettering. I can't even imagine. Like back when these things got hand lettered and guys were actually sitting there like tracing out lines and then using their pen to, like, insanity. That is the true art form. I'm doing the bastardized version of it now.
Oh, I would totally do that just to say that I had that experience and then like never do like what I don't want to do.
Well, then you also have the nuances of like your narration boxes, announcer voices, shout bubbles, whispers.
And then you've got your onomatopoeias. Are you doing those in font? Are they part of the artwork? Are they sometimes, or is it somewhere in the middle? I mean, yeah, and like you were saying, I mean, so you've got your typical black letter, white bubble, word balloon, but then you have other characters that, like a book that I'm doing, my magnum opus, if you will, is a book called Novus Ordo that I'm currently I'm about to release the 2nd issue of. So, shameless plug, insert here. Like I have certain characters that kind of have a flip or a switch that gets flipped. And so whenever that switch flips, I invert. It's a black and white book, so I can't do a whole lot else. So I invert the lettering and it becomes white letter on black. And that seems like a simple thing, but you're conveying information to the reader when you even make a simple change like that. Like every other character in this book, when they talk, it looks like this. But for some reason now when this character speaks, it looks like this. So that's significant. And when you add color into it and you're doing all these other things, like you start getting into, lettering that your balloons are no longer even solid lines where you're doing like Kirby dots or something, like there's just an infinite number of possibilities that you really could put together. Yes, you're limited by making it legible for someone who's trying to read your book. But that's really the limit. As long as it's legible and you're not stepping on the artwork, you really can't do anything that you want. And it also, like, the word balloons, like you can't just throw word balloons up in random places just because you've got a gap in artwork. You also have to take into consideration that Western world brains are wired to read a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And so not only are you having to read left to right within the balloon itself, but now your eye should naturally follow every balloon to the next balloon. And so there's a lot of really subtle things that you have to do to get that right. And there's some aspects of, classical lettering that I don't necessarily agree with. Like the tail has to come out of the center bottom of the bubble and it needs to
no. As long
straight to the mouth.
No,
yeah.
no.
I don't follow that so much. I get that maybe that's a faux pas, but a lot of times
as long as we know who's talking.
You know what my pet peeve is with tails? Is the variation in size of the opening. Like that shit will freak me out. I can't tell you how many times I told Meredith, you got to go back and change the size of that tail. You got to go back. They need to all be the same fucking size.
At least roughly the visual.
The letter O. That's
not
my goal.
Be able to tell the difference when you are just looking at it.
Thank you.
Yeah, because if you've got one that's super skinny and it's coming way down here, and then the next one's like, this.
Right?
Nita's mean to me. She's like, cut it. Hey, your bubbles suck. Do it again. She's mean.
I'm
but,
a good
but But that's the thing. I want that feedback in order to do better, because your first time out lettering, I'm sure, was a hot mess, and you're like, oh man. But since you do the lettering,
got some examples in here. Before I had, the lettering in this book is awful. I will not lie to you. The lettering in this book is awful.
No, since you do the lettering and everything, and when you get the art back and and all of that good stuff, have you ever edited or like done like significant changes to your dialogue based on everything that's in front of you now? So as you're going, you're like, that I can improve on that. I can do that. Is that things that you do?
Most of the time, even when I'm writing a script, that's just the version of the dialogue that made sense to me in that moment. And it's kind of like, I don't want to say improv, because it's not improv, but like, see, and I've never been an actor, so I might be completely talking out of my ass here, but if you're doing something where you're in a play or something, and you're having the same, you're doing, or I guess like if you're in a sitcom where it's a little bit more like open to what you get to kind of ad lib, as long as you get the right information across. The words that you specifically say don't matter as long as the information is properly conveyed. That's kind of how I view dialogue. So I have an idea of what needs to be said, and I have the gist of the conversation in my head. And, that'll look like one thing when I don't have any visual cues to tell me where to put something and, how is this going to look on the page. So it'll look one way when it's in the script. And then when I get the artwork back, I kind of start looking at, okay, well, this is the gist of the conversation. And I'll try to keep as close to it as I can. But there are times where I've, whole cloth cut lines of dialogue. I've looked at it and been like, well, I don't need that line of dialogue now because the artwork is doing a good enough job in telling that piece of the story. So I'll just back away. And, like when we were doing the body, when I wrote the body, in my head, there was not a page of that book that did not have dialogue on it. Somewhere, every page would have had dialogue. And when I actually got the finished artwork and I went to go and letter it, there ended up being like 2 or 3 pages. I didn't put lettering on it at all. I just let the artwork tell the story on those pages, because anything that I would have added, it's subtraction by addition sometimes. And you have to recognize that. And, but that's true of every step of this process. I mean, you don't want to do so much that you're actually hurting the idea that you're trying to get across. And so like I said, the version of what ends up on the page in the final version of the book is spiritually the same as what it originally was, but very, very seldom is it actually what I ended up, or what I wrote originally. And when I do my own work, when I'm doing my own artwork for stories that I write, I don't even write dialogue. It's just an outline. I get the page laid out, and then I've got an idea in my head of what the dialogue is going to be, and I fill in, and I put it all together there. I don't ever actually write dialogue until I'm doing the lettering.
But that's only cool. That's a cool system to have only if you're doing it all.
Which is why I actually prefer to be the person doing everything, because it works so much better. And I read there was a book by oh gosh, I can't remember who the editor on the book was, but basically it took all these different artists and kind of walked you through what their process was of how they got from point A to point B. And the one that really I jobbed with the most was Mike Mignola. He was one of the artists that was featured in that book. And he was talking about how when he started, he started with the artwork. He would have some general idea of what the story was going to be, but then he would just go straight to the artwork and fill everything else in once he had that piece done. And that kind of was what pointed me in the direction that I ended up going in. Is like, if I'm going to have complete creative control over every aspect of this, then I just let it work the way I want it to work. But when you're dealing with another person, like I said, you have your dialogue, you have your ideas, and then when you get the final work, you make it work within the page that you're given. And, don't comics, you know, they're drawings that you read and what's the saying? There's some saying about how it's the pictures tell the story and the words are whatever. I don't even remember. Great quote. Quote me on all that.
Wait, I'm totally doing it. That's my next Facebook post.
Well, one of the things that I like about lettering, especially if it's my own work, is and Nita and I have done this with one of our stories, where it was in an anthology one way, and then we were invited to bring it over to a different magazine, and so we were like, well, we can make improvements on this, you know.
Yeah,
So
there were a
version
couple things
2,
that we wish we would have tweaked before, and so
right? So like version 2 was, I don't want to say it was necessarily an improvement, but it was neat because we already knew the story at that point.
it was an improvement.
We knew where it was going to go and stuff. And it's like, okay, well, how can we tweak this dialogue to really match what's on the page? And so I found that really interesting to have like two versions of the same art out there. But the story, like you were saying before, the spirit of it is the same, but the words in itself were different, you know?
Yeah,
So
the telling
you're
was a
getting
little better.
you're getting two different stories, essentially. And so I found that was kind of interesting. It's one of the things that I love about lettering.
It's not two
so
different stories. It's kind of like we weren't exactly sure.
It's the variant version.
It's the Full Metal Alchemist versus Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. That's what it is.
I'm not enough of an anime guy to get that.
Okay, so basically with Full Metal Alchemist, they got ahead on the anime before the manga was finished. So while they got ideas from the creator of how it was going to go when it was written, it ended up being a good bit different than the way the anime had portrayed it.
Gotcha. So it got Game of
So
Thrones.
they came back and remade it, and it was way better. Oh, yeah, basically. Oh my God, that fucking. Have y'all seen that meme of the fucking horse? Game of Thrones, how it started, and it's the ass and the horse, and it's got all its muscular structure and shit. And it's got this like fucking 2-year-old scribble shit in the front.
Yes.
Oh my God. Oh, they fucked that up so bad.
Accurate. Yeah. So, and the last piece of lettering, this is the last thing, unless you guys want to keep talking about lettering, but the one thing I will say about it is, and one of the reasons I enjoy the lettering so much is because to me, when the lettering goes on and you finish that and you finally got a page that's got the pencils, the colors, all the artwork's finished, and now it's got the lettering and the word balloons and stuff laid on top of it. That's the point at which, to me, it becomes a comic book page.
Yes.
And before that, it was just cool artwork, sequential artwork. But once those balloons went in place and the letters are there and you can read this thing now you have a comic book.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. And we are scrolling through the campaign right now. We'll play the video for you as well in just a little bit.
Are we good on music?
Yeah. Is it it's not
free?
I don't know. Did we lose him?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking to me. Yes. We specifically chose music that was open source.
Thank you.
Cool. So we are scrolling through the body of the body. The body of the body. Tell us a bit about the body. Where did this idea come from?
Well, so
I know you kind of you mentioned it a little bit earlier today.
So like I said, that scene actually right there that you just had pulled up, those two guys in the car, that scene right there is where that whole idea spanned from. It was just two guys driving in a car coming from somewhere where some shit had gone down. And they're just talking about grunge era music. And one guy's a little older than the other guy. And, like just that dichotomy of youth and, whatever. Because the other guy's like, well, how about we play something from this era? And he says, last time I gave you the radio, you played that shitty church music. And it was what he was talking about churches, that it is still shitty churches music to me, at least. But I'm a metal rock guy, but whatever. So really the whole thing started from this scene right here. And then from there, I kind of worked worked through, like, all right, well, what are these guys doing? Okay, well, they've taken a job, and what's the job? Okay, they've got something in the trunk. Well, what do they have in the trunk? Okay, well, it's a body. And it kind of, and then it was, I've got to spoil it, I guess, a little bit.
Oh, okay.
No, we can avoid spoilers.
But, so, okay, I'll say this. I am very, very into the occult. I'm not a practicing occultist or anything like that, but I'm very interested in the occult. I'm very interested in the paranormal. I am very interested in alien UFO lore and conspiracy theories. Doesn't mean that I necessarily believe any of it wholeheartedly, but just the idea.
But some of it I do.
Some of it I feel like that might be a different podcast or a different interview show. Because I could talk about this all day if you want to. So what this ended up being was, as I was working through the story and some of the pieces started to fall into place, it became, all right, well, let me start taking all of these disparate pieces of UFO lore and UFO conspiracy theory. And so, like, the Greys or Zeta Reticulans, the shape-shifting lizard men of Alpha Draconis, and then you've got the Pleiadians and all the, who are the tall whites, who are the men in black, like all of these things that really, when you put them all together, none of this makes sense. Like none of these things can coexist with each other in any logical way, really. And so then it became a thought exercise of, how does all of that fit together? And so, yes, this is a standalone 24-page single issue of comic book, but it really taps into, and it is part of a world where I have a Google Doc that is just me outlining what all of those things are, how all of these pieces fit together. Like, it's got the Illuminati in it, it's got the Majestic 12 in it, it's got everything in it. Now, 99% of these things don't appear in this book, to be perfectly honest, but this book takes place in that world. And so that was really kind of how that's where it came from. It didn't necessarily start out there, but then I was like, well, okay, so if I've got this and this, if I've got these two elements in this story, then okay, well, I'm kind of creating, like, this doesn't fit to lore. So how, like, what piece of lore is this? Okay, well, what piece of lore could this relate, or could relate to it in other ways? And then all the pieces just started falling into place. And I did, 4 days worth of work on building a world for a story that takes place over 24 issues.
I was going to ask you that. So what's next after the body? So you said 24 issues?
Or 24 pages. I'm sorry.
24 pages. Oh, okay.
My bad. It's one issue, 24 pages. This is it. This story is start to finish, one standalone independent story. There is.
Are you going to write the entire series, like all of them as individual stories, and that all connect together?
So the idea that I had, and actually, so one of our tiers on our campaign includes the PDF edition of a story that I wrote and drew that's called The Sabine Incident. And it also takes place in this world. It's a completely unrelated story, but it also takes place in this world.
Nice.
So the original idea was to, yes, have all of these disconnect, almost like an anthology, like an anthology in terms of none of these stories relate directly to each other, but they all do relate to each other.
They're all within this world.
Yeah.
So as you're kind of reading through them, you start piecing everything together. So I don't know that the characters that you meet in this book will ever be revisited necessarily, but the world itself definitely will be.
Nice.
So yeah, it's.
How far do you plan out for things like that? Because it's one thing to go, oh, like, because
you has a Google Doc outlining it. He's planning out.
You
pretty
write a
clever, man.
story, right? You write a story, and you have your main protagonist and antagonist and all that stuff, and you're putting that together, and all of a sudden these secondary characters suddenly have voices, and you're like, damn it, I thought I was done with this.
Yeah, shut
Right?
up already.
Right? Or
So-
you have to wait your turn. Yeah, I talk to myself. But so is that the connective tissue is the world? This world building?
In this particular instance, yes, the connective tissue is the world that it all takes place in. Because, like I said, there's not necessarily any overlay in characters or anything like that.
Mhm.
And the idea was to present it like to go in and look for UFO and paranormal incidents and kind of adapt them, almost change. Not necessarily adapt it verbatim, but take some inspiration from it to come up with my own thing. So that's kind of how that world works. But probably a more direct way for me to answer this would be to talk again. I mentioned the book Novus Ordo that I'm doing.
Yes.
And that's just me. So that, and the reason I call it my magnum opus is because it's taking all those things that I talked about. It's taking all of this occult, crazy, like esoteric BS and filtering it all through the lens of, like, what are these things? If these things physically existed in a world, how would that work and what would it look like? And so from that perspective, that started with an idea for what was originally going to be about a 3-issue story arc, but it's probably now going to be more like 4 or 5 because I'm on the 3rd issue already, and I'm not quite halfway to where I want to be by the time the story's over. So it's kind of expanding on me a little bit. But I've already, for that particular story, the characters that are in the story in that first arc aren't necessarily the main characters of that story. And so I've already in my head, I've got an idea for what the next story arc looks like, how the world is going to change, and issues. I don't even know what numbers they're going to be yet. But I do have all of these events kind of lined out in my head, and I'm working towards them. And that's part of the reason why I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, is because I'm going to work towards it and get there organically. And I don't want to be like, I have to be there by issue 4, because that doesn't work. But kind of to your point, there was a character that so far the character has been in one scene of that book. But already in my head, I was like, man, that character, I really like this character. I like what happens with this character. I like the way this character changes over the course of this first story arc. I'm going to make him the main character of my second story arc. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of started to, populate itself out and, like, okay, well, if that's the case, I like this character. How does that fit? Where do those pieces come in? And then you start, it all starts for me. Like, you have to, or at least this is the way I work. I have to go in and I have to really drill down into what things are. Like, I have to create the world, and then I can start kind of seeing how the world plays with itself, Well, that's a bad way to say that, but, start kind of seeing how the world plays out on its own. Maybe that's a more, more friendly way.
I like how the world plays with itself. That's beautiful.
Oh, the quotable quotes on Ragin' With. Well, we've only got a couple of minutes left here with Billy Diamond Jr., so make sure that you guys head over to Kickstarter, give it a like, give it a share, back it if you can. And we're all about cross-promoting indie creators. So if you've got a campaign going, an update, maybe you guys talk to each other, get in each other's updates and things and share those worlds. Hex Allen, thank you for tuning in live. We've also got Trish Bankston here. Thank you guys for tuning in live. So we've got, we're going to play the video before we get out of here, but tell us a little bit about your other books and where people can find them. So
you can find everything on my website, scribblycomics.com. I've got links to Comixology or Gumroad or, Global Comics, wherever it's at, there's a link to find it. So right now, like I said, I'm working on the Novus Ordo book. That's the big thing that I'm doing right now. I'm also rebooting a story that I'd originally released as an Instagram comic because turns out I hate doing that. And also, I keep getting asked by my middle-aged parent friends, "Oh, if I bought your book, could my kid read it?" I'm like, well, I mean, there's no cussing and no boobs or anything like that, but I mean, somebody does get stabbed in the neck and a giant octopus kind of smashes like 7 or 8 people into bloody bits, so probably not. And so I decided like that book was done in kind of more of a cartoony, all ages style anyway, which really just makes it more baffling that people are getting decapitated in the course of the story. It's like Rick and Morty almost. I mean, it's not to that level, but you know, the graphic violence is there, which is the hardest. It's the hardest thing for me not to do is graphic violence for some reason. So I'm redoing that as kind of a, if a parent asks me, if I buy this, can my kid read it? I can say definitively, yes, your child can read this. So that's kind of, you know, I've also got kids. I want them to be able to read something that I made.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, everything I'm doing, you can find there. You can also follow me on Instagram at Scribbly Comics. And you also follow Jay. He's at J_Red, JAYRED. I mean, I'll be, you know, I know I'm the one here talking about the book, but
yeah, he's a cool dude though. We've interacted a little bit, so yeah.
He is 90% responsible for what this book ended up being. I mean, the artwork, the coloring, the layouts, every piece of visual information that you see in this campaign is all him. He did the video. He did all of the bumper stuff inside the body of the campaign. He's been the one that's been hustling up supporters on social media to the point where he got put in Instagram jail.
Oh.
Well, fortunately, it happened right after the book funded. So,
oh, nice.
So we were good there.
So wait a minute. How do you get in Instagram jail? I've been in Twitter jail and Facebook jail.
You've never been in Facebook jail.
I haven't been in Facebook jail. It was for
living off my infamy.
It was for 24 hours, but they gave me a reprieve. They were like, "Oh, our bad." So yeah, I guess it doesn't count. Fine, Nita. Fine.
I do all that hard time.
How in the world did you get into Instagram jail?
So he got Instagram jail because he was liking and following, and probably from their algorithm standpoint, he was spamming people.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's like, you must be a bot because nobody spends that much time on social media.
Here's a trick people should know. Instagram's pattern right now, you are safe to unfollow up to 50 non-followers, and currently the safe zone is, I would say, not do more than 30 follows at a time within a 12 to 24 hour period. Like, slow your rolls.
I was following like 8,000 people at one point because I had taken the approach of growing an audience by doing the whole follow for follow thing, you know?
That never works.
And I got to that point and I'm like, I can't even, like, this feed is such garbage. I can't do anything with it. And it took me a month to get it down. Now I follow less than 100 people. But it was a slog to get back down to where it is now.
It takes time.
But yeah, I am not good at social media. To my detriment, I am not good at social media.
And it's like a necessary evil, especially since a lot of people are working from home and all that stuff and really rely on it for their marketing, especially. I've said it too. You could have the best product out there, and if you don't have a social media presence, nobody's going to know you.
Nobody
or how to
knows
find
what you're
you.
doing.
Well, that's why something like he's doing right now is essential. Like, a lot of these guys get these egos. They think they make a fucking book. They can slap it on Kickstarter and they're going to fund. Dude, nobody's looking for you, stranger. You got to go make yourself known. Get out there. Hoe yourself out just as much as your book. Just play there.
And see, I would rather do this than try to build. So to do the other social media stuff.
You show some podcasters some love and they'll love you back, man. And so we're out there promoting daily anyway. So the fact that you freaking volunteer, you came on and stuff, of course that's going to be an encouragement for us to scratch your back. You know what I mean? There's an art here, but a lot of people are not catching on to that.
Hit the button. I'm putting out a t-shirt, I swear. We're going to have an overlay that just says hit the button at the very top of it. But we are at the end of our hour and we are going to play the video. So I'm going to hit this button. You guys ready for this?
Do it.
Let's do it.
I am Billy Diamond Jr. I am the writer and letterer for The Body, which I co-created with my longtime friend and collaborator, Jay Red, who did the art and design work for the book. The Body is a 24-page, full-color, completely self-contained science fiction action story that, from a creative standpoint, both Jay and I are extremely proud of what we put together here. If I had to give you an elevator pitch, I'd say somewhere along the lines of X-Files meets Mad Max. The story revolves around these two guys who work for these mysterious administrators, and one night they get a call to go out and do a job, and when things get sideways on them, they have to try to figure out how to get it back on the rails. So the creative work for The Body is actually completely finished. We've already got all the pages done. We've got it fully lettered, colored, compiled. It's ready to go to the printer from that standpoint. So really all we're looking for is funding for the printing and the shipping of the book. So we've thrown together some pretty neat rewards. We've got some extra stuff that we put in there as well. Hopefully things that you guys will be excited about, as excited as we are to get this book in your hands. So the first tier is actually a high quality PDF edition of The Body. And then right above that, we put together a PDF bundle, like a deluxe PDF bundle that includes the PDF edition of The Body. It also includes a PDF edition of a kind of like a behind the scenes process booklet that Jay put together that includes some unused art and some design work and things like that he did early on. And then we've also put in there a PDF edition of a story that I wrote and drew myself called The Sabine Incident. So this book is a completely unrelated story from The Body, but it spiritually takes place in the same world as The Body takes place. And then from there, you move on and we get into the physical rewards, the actual hard copy printed editions of the book, which also includes all the PDFs that I just mentioned. We're also offering a printed edition that includes a signed copy to a limited number of backers. And we're also offering to a limited number of backers hand-done sketches along with everything else that I've already listed done by Jay himself. Hey, we're just excited to get this book into the hands of the readers. Like I said before, we're extremely proud of what we put together here. We had a blast making this. We had a blast working together to bring this project to life. And, you know, we hope that you guys are as excited to read it as we are for you to read it. Hopefully we can count on your support.
And we are at the end of our hour with Billy Diamond Jr. He's got The Body on Kickstarter right now. We've got links in the show notes. Make sure that you get over there, throw it some support, share it out with your friends. Let's network and do this right. Billy, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I had a blast.
To sit with you for this hour. Good luck with the campaign. Good luck with all of the other books that are coming out. We look forward to speaking with you in the future about those as well. Hey, Nita, you're on mute, girl.
Yo.
We got final words to do.
Oh, throw my dudes.
We're out of here, you guys. Thanks for tuning in. See ya. Hey there. This is Meredith Loughran with RAGIN. And I wanted to let you know that we encourage and promote independent creators and their projects through organic interaction, consultations, and more. Visit Nita and me at RAGINAVC.com for details and contact information. Hit the button.